I wouldn't mind. I even said it this week, and I did it 30 seconds later. I'm the king of unmuting, of course. Welcome to Final Whistle's Rugby Show here every Wednesday evening at 8 p.m. with myself, Breifne Early, and of course, Ciaron Noble. Ciaron, you're very welcome. Another week, another fantastic weekend of rugby.
Yeah, absolutely. I really enjoyed some of the games that happened in the AIL this weekend. I didn't get to go to one, but I always watch the videos and read whatever reports I can get. But it was another exciting weekend, and things are starting to really heat up now in the second half of the season.
Yes, some excitement across all 5 divisions. Of course, the ladies Interpros, the women's Interpros as well. They're getting down to decision time. Munster took a big step towards gathering that title at the weekend with a big win over Leinster. A bit of a surprise proposal after the pitch as well. We'll be talking to Diarmuid Kearney later in the programme about all of that down in Musgrave Park over the weekend. We'll also be looking at the Connacht and Munster Schools Cups that are ongoing as we speak across the 2 provinces at the moment. Of course, Leinster and Ulster not quite at the business end just yet. They all kick off in about 2 weeks' time. We'll bring you those details as well. But I suppose today's, if maybe you want to introduce today's guest, and I suppose why we're looking at Division 1B of the league, it's really, really tight. We've been talking about it for weeks. Who's going to be joining us on today's show, Ciaron?
Well, towards the end last season, there was a team that was kind of really impressing me, and I tipped them actually as dark horses for the league at the very start, City of Armagh. And today we're very lucky to have their head coach, Chris Parker, on with us.
Chris, you're very, very welcome.
Thanks very much for having me. Delighted to be on.
No, it's our pleasure to have you. And I suppose we've been talking about your team over the last number of weeks. I think it's 6 wins on the bounce since the defeat to St. Mary's College back in game week 4. And now here we are, joint top of the table with Buccaneers, but it's been a really, really good season for yourselves up there in Armagh.
Yeah, we're delighted with the season so far. I guess 6 wins on the bounce is a big thing for us. I would always describe us as consistently inconsistent, and we started the season that way, and then I guess we just sort of have got a wee bit of a run going and a wee bit of consistency in us. And we're delighted 10 games in to be in the position that we're in.
And you talk about that inconsistency, but what do you think has been different this year that has made you get that bit of consistency and get you the wins under your belt and the 6 wins in a row?
I think the group's quite young, and they've now sort of over the last couple of years matured now into sort of mid-20s. And whilst there's sort of another younger group coming through behind them, I think there's just a bit more maturity around having played at that level and a wee bit more belief that they can kick on and maybe push themselves a wee bit further. We've been massively helped for the first time with having contracted Ulster players come in. And certainly the 3 guys, Shea O'Brien, we really count as one of our own still, but the 3 guys, Michael McDonald, Frank Bradshaw Ryan and James McCormick have really added to us from a quality perspective, and they've driven performances in training from our club players to try and make themselves better as well. So I think that's improved the quality within the group, but I think there's just a real bit more belief in their own abilities now, and I think it's starting to hopefully shine through a wee bit.
Talk to us a bit about, I suppose, in recent times within the club, how it's grown over the last few years and how you've got to this position where you're challenging for promotion to the top division in Ireland.
Yeah, so I was lucky enough to come in just after they'd won promotion to 2A. And then we sort of went back to back. We got out of 2A within a season into 1B. But, the club's only been in senior rugby for the last 12 years. And, we still have 2 guys in our senior squad who played first 15 when the club was junior. So it's great. It's a great journey for guys like that. And, we're very supported by volunteers off the pitch within the club. And it's, they've great plans of where they want to be with the club and developing the club off the pitch. We're fantastically lucky to have such a large mini section, which then just helps to bring guys through into youth rugby, or they maybe go to local schools and then come back to the club. We have a good catchment area there. So I guess it's just a very much there's so many of them around the country, just good country community clubs supported really well by the local area. and sort of we've certainly in the last 6 years we have been on that wee bit of an upward curve, and it's been great.
And I suppose we had Instonians on last week, and they're kind of similar to City of Armagh in that way. They've come up from junior rugby only last season, and now they're flying in 2C. But I guess from your point of view, in that 6 years you've been there, is this kind of your best season so far in terms of being in 1B, or would the promotion from 2A to 1B been better?
I'll tell you at the end of the season. From a performance point of view, yeah, it has been, and the way we're trying to play and stuff is probably the best quality of rugby we've had. That year in 2A was so up and down. We only just about scraped into the playoffs, and then, sort of went away to Highfield, somehow won away to Highfield, and then had a home final against Nina. But no, I think this year's been very enjoyable now. There's been really good numbers training every Tuesday and Thursday night, and that makes life so much easier for myself and the management team,
Yeah, in terms of when we compare last year's table to this year's table, and we're only 10 games into the 18 to be played, and already you're just winning a single point of last year's tally. So you've matched last year's performance in the opening 10 games. How far can this team go? Is promotion a realistic proposition at the end of 18 games, or playoffs, perhaps?
The group want to be in the mix, certainly. It's something that they've openly said that they would like to try and get into that top 4 and have a crack at the playoffs. And as I said, there's some guys who've been here for sort of the whole ride from junior rugby, and they had to win a playoff to get into 2A, and they won the playoff to get from 2A to 1B. So there's a belief there within the group that, you just have to get top 4, and then it's 2 cup finals. And everything else that's happened in the season's gone out the window. So there's certainly a determination to try and get to that playoffs and see where we end up.
I always say about 1B that I think it's the most competitive of the 5 divisions in the AIL. There's a lot of twists and turns, and a lot can happen. So even though you've had a relatively good 8 wins out of 10, I think it is, in the season so far, that game against Naas on Saturday, it's huge, because I was saying to you before, I reckon Naas could have a massive second half to the season, similar to the one they had last season, where they just scraped into the playoffs, and then they ended up getting all the way to the final. So how important is it that you keep this run going and you don't let it slip?
Yeah, I totally agree with you with that sort of run in. We played Naas last year, and then they went on their run. And they have the quality and ability to do that again. We have a hell of a task to go to 4-0 on Saturday and get something from the game. And I know people probably just look at league positions, but if people have seen some of Naas's performances and stuff, and how close they have pushed Bucks obviously last week, and how they beat Bucks before Christmas, they're a quality outfit. But I think sort of our mini run there of 6 games and what Naas did last year, if you can, in 1B, if you can string a run of games together, you're going to pull yourself up the league pretty quickly. But at the same time, if you go on a losing run of 3 or 4 games, you're dropping off pretty quickly. I think Mary's last week went from 3rd to 6th. It's extremely tight, and I think all the sides are probably just thinking, if we can just get a wee bit of a run going, you never know where you end up. So it's a great league, a great league for probably the neutrals who are trying to see who's going to beat who this week, because I think everyone probably on their day just thinks, if we're in a good place going into Saturday, we'd back ourselves to beat each other, So, great league.
You talk about that kind of getting a good run together. You're in the middle of that at the moment, or hopefully in the middle of it from your point of view, not quite at the end just yet. 6 wins on the bounce, but the opening 4 games, and you talked about that inconsistency. It was win 1, lose 1, win 1, lose 1. What's the difference between those 4 games at the start of the season and, say, the last 6 where you've managed to get that kind of week in, week out, just grinding out those results?
I think probably it was still just betting a few things in and just familiarizing ourselves with how we want to play. We sort of came into the year wanting to make a few changes, and I think whilst a lot of the teams in this league are probably quite familiar with each other, certainly away to UCC was a bit of a different venue for the boys and things, and any college team on a hard track at the start or end of the year is not exactly the easiest thing. So we were in that and had opportunities and tailed off in the second half, and then the same happened with Mary's, where we were in it at half time and turned around and had the hill and had a gale at our backs and managed to throw it away. So I think there's sort of like we were producing performances for 40 minutes of a game and we just couldn't really string it together for 50, 60, and then it sort of clicked. And I think once it clicked, then just that bit more belief came with the lads, and we've been able to go on this bit of a run now.
I feel like the Palace grounds is such a fortress for you guys. I think I'm right in saying you're unbeaten there this season. And how important has that home advantage been? And even if you can stay where you are and you end up in the top two, you get home advantage in a semi-final. I know you might not want to talk about that now, but it could prove massive later on in the season.
I think, yeah, like in previous years, it hasn't been as much of a fortress. And this year, just we've started well and we've got a fairly vociferous crowd is maybe one way of putting it, that get behind the lads. And it's like any team, you just feel comfortable being at home and you enjoy being on your home pitch. And if you can keep winning and just keep momentum going, there's that belief there that when you turn up and you're in your home changing room on a Saturday, that you back yourself to be able to go and deliver.
Of course, attention kind of changed into that chase for the top of the table as we go later and later into the spring, and you're up against Buccaneers, who, of course, with a first-time, not a first-time coach, but a new coach. New for this season, let's just say. He wasn't there last year. I don't think there's anything particularly new about him, but putting yourself up against Eddie O'Sullivan is in that kind of chess match for the next 8 weeks of maybe, do I give lads a rest here, or do we go hell for leather and just try and get every point that's out there? Like, is there a strategy to this, or is it just a case of just seeing how the chips fall, or have you got kind of a game plan against someone with Eddie's experience of this kind of closing games out, closing tournaments out in over years and years and decades within the sport?
Buccaneers are well down the road without me giving you a boring answer or a soundbite or anything. Look, it's not a case, we'll rest players if they're injured, but it's not a case of targeting games or anything here. It's you've got to try and pick up wins when you can in this league, because as we sort of said earlier, if you could very easily get into a losing streak pretty quickly, so it's trying to keep the momentum going, keep everything rolling, and trying to go to Naas and pick up some points on Saturday again, and just wherever we'll finish, and if it comes down to a shootout at the end of the season against Buccaneers, fantastic. But there's a lot of other teams, and we've only 3 home games left out of our last 8. So we've 5 fairly tricky away games, so it's a fairly difficult run-in on the flip side of it as well.
And you have your fair share of class players. I was saying to you before that I did the co-commentary with Justin Middleton for the old Belvedere game last season, and Dylan Nelson was electric that day. He was scoring tries for fun. Like, you have some really good players in your squad, and that's really important come kind of towards the end.
Yeah, a few guys with X Factor. Dylan's certainly a guy who's got a lot of X Factor about him. And he's unfortunately out at the minute with a groin injury, but he'll hopefully be back in a couple of weeks' time. And certainly on the hard surfaces towards the end of the season, that's when he sort of enjoys his rugby the most, And we have a lot of good lads from Armagh area. Majority of them have either come through the club youth system or they've come through the local school. So they're all fairly familiar with each other, but most of them have probably been in underage provincial sides and just sort of not made the next step to sort of sub-academy and things. So yeah, no, there's a lot of quality players there. There's a lot of room for them to get better still, as well. But we're lucky with the way our youth system's very strong and feeds into us, but also that the local school's able to feed into us with players as well.
If you're a betting man, would you back yourselves to bring home a little bit of silverware, maybe a league title at the end of the season? Is that something that you think is realistic, or too early to call?
It's too early to call with 8 games to go. If we're in the mix going into the final 3, well, then it's maybe something we'll consider. we're aware of where we are at this time. But we were 3 seasons ago, maybe, we were at Christmas after 9 games first in the league, and we finished 8th. We had an awful second half to the season. So a lot of the guys are still there. And actually, last Saturday, the boys brought it up in the changing rooms and sort of said, like, we've been here before, lads, and we've tailed off pretty quickly before. So there is hopefully some learnings from that, but also a realization that, especially in 1B, you can slide down the league as quick as you can climb it. You know, there isn't really a gap opened up yet between anyone, and it's not like anyone's dead and buried in relegation battle or anything just yet. So it's certainly it'll be a long run in over the next 8 matches.
I do think somebody is going to go on a charge in this second half of the season, because it always happens, especially in 1B. And who do you think that might be? That might surprise a few people. Do you think it's going to be an Old Belvedere? I know they're doing well at the moment. Can St. Mary's pick it up again? Can UCC find a bit of form? Who do you think it's going to be?
It wouldn't surprise me if it was Naas, to be honest. Like, I think they've got a few key guys back from injury. And whenever Craig Ronaldson plays, he transforms how the team are able to play, you know. And if they can keep him fit and keep the guys fit who they've got back from injury, some of the guys in their back row and things, it really wouldn't surprise me to see them go on a big run. Now, I know they're maybe lower down the table than some of those other sides, but I wouldn't be surprised at all to see them. And you possibly could argue that Highfield are maybe just at the start of their run. You know, the fact that they were able to go back to back against Mary's there was 2 huge results for them that then saw them leapfrog, you know, up after, you know, they maybe had a difficult-ish start to the season. They didn't get a bit of a run going, and, you know, it's always a really hard place to go. Highfield, we have to go there at the end of February, and they have a way of winning and grinding things out. And, you know, those are probably the 2 teams that I would expect to start to string a few things together and really rattle up the league.
Interesting times ahead in Division 1B. Well, Chris, thanks for joining us. That's pretty much all we have time for on tonight's show, to have a chat with you. But best of luck at the weekend against Naas, and hopefully it all comes good for you and your lads before the tail end of the season in terms of that title challenge that we hope is coming for you. Best of luck.
Super. Thank you for having me. All the best.
Chris Parker there. Interesting. They're really doing really well at the moment, Ciaran. We might just stay in 1B for the moment. We'll go through the results and fixtures before we go on to the women's Interpros. But I think we mentioned Buccaneers there a little bit, and I think it's we had Shane Layden from Buccaneers on the show very recently, just before Christmas, and just our condolences to himself and to his family on the passing of his dad in the last couple of days. It's a reminder maybe that sometimes life and family is up there as well. And we know we talked about his dad, and we met at a pre-season game back in the Connacht Senior Cup down in Buccaneers, and we had a chat with him, and very sad to see that news today and last night. So just our condolences to all the Buccaneers crew, but especially to the Layden family and Shane and his brother and sister Connor and Sarah as well. They're neighbours of mine here, so it's nice to kind of just remember them and remember family. It's what we're all here for. But we'll take a look at the Division 2 results. We did flash them up, the Division 1B, I should say, results across the bottom of the table there. Yourself, anything interesting in that, in terms of the teams or what you thought of the games of the weekend? A big win, obviously.
Actually, the results kind of went how I would have imagined them to be honest. The only one that was maybe a little bit surprising was Highfield beating Mary's, but I thought Highfield would actually do it. So the results were kind of the way I thought they'd be. I actually agree with Chris very much on the Naas. I think Naas will be the team to make a charge, just like they did last season, because I think they have some fantastic players. Oscar Cawley is a brilliant little scrum half, and he was just today announced in the Ireland under-20s team, so they have plenty of talent there. Andrew Osborne has been really good for them as well this season, but that top 6 are kind of, there's a little gap between the top 6 and the rest. If you can see there, you've got Mary's on 28, and then you've got Naas on 19, so it's really becoming, you know, a six team lead, but if Naas can kind of close the gap, who knows? UCC, I don't know what's going on. I think that's 6 on the bounce now they've lost. It's crazy considering where they were at the very start. But Buccaneers and City of Armagh.
Sorry, just to interrupt you, but for me, I think I always look at points difference when it comes to tables, and after halfway in the season, the table doesn't really lie, and kind of points difference backs that up across the 10 games that played.
Yeah, for sure. I think nobody can deny that Buccaneers and City of Armagh have been the two kind of informed teams this season, and they deserve to be where they are. They've only had 2 defeats each. There's no denying that. So it's just all about, as Chris said, keeping that momentum and not letting it slip, because in 1B, he's right. You can either go one way or the other. You can be winning all the time, or you can be losing all the time, like we see with UCC at the moment. So it's very important just to keep level head. And, as he said, once you get to that top 4, you have to kind of treat it as a new competition and you start again. But for the moment, they're just focusing on taking every game as it comes and looking for the wins where they can.
Absolutely. Well, 2B, of course, or 1B, keep saying 2B. 1B, all the fixtures and results and league tables and all that information available on our website at finalwhistle.ie. We're going to take a little bit of a detour now. We're going to bring in our reporter, Diarmuid Kearney. And Diarmuid, you were covering both the women's interprovincials at the weekend and also the Munster Senior Schools Cup last weekend. We might start with the ladies, and I suppose the proposal took a lot of the attention away at the end of the game, but a great game, a great advertisement for the game of women's rugby in the 4 provinces, and Munster and Leinster. Really, I suppose most people's expectation of the title decider. Give us your thoughts on the game.
I suppose I do agree with you there. When going into the game, I previewed that this game was going to be probably the title decider. In fairness, between all of the 4 provinces, with the way that things have gone throughout the last couple of years, it's either Munster or Leinster that do bring home the silverware. It hasn't really changed, to be honest. But it was fantastic. It was a fantastic game, definitely hard hitting and bruising. Typically what you'd expect from a Munster versus Leinster encounter. I know the girls are definitely friends off the field, but the minute the ball was kicked off and the whistle went, it was the friendships were forgotten about, and it was hard hitting. It was frantic, and the Munster atmosphere, the crowd was phenomenal as well, and it was definitely a great advertisement. There was a lot of young clubs that were there bringing people to watch the games, and it's great that we can have the games on TV, or that people can go to these games and have those type of encounters that are enthralling. And it was a game that I didn't expect Munster to build up a lead like they did at the early stages of it, and then Leinster came back, and then the frantic final 10 minutes was hard. It was heart stopping for the Munster faithful that were around me, where the press area is in Musgrave Park. You're in the main stand, and it was getting quite loud, and people were on the edge of their seats for turnovers, and for every pass was forward, or every pass there was an offside infringement, trying to get the referee to give something to each team. But no, absolutely cracking game of rugby to watch.
Do you think it's fair to say that it was the Munster back row that made the difference? Maeve O'Leary and Dorothy Wall, I thought, were exceptional for Munster in both games. But I think that was kind of what made the difference in the game. The physicality of the Munster players just kind of edged Leinster at the end.
Yeah, no, the physicality that Munster back row is amazing to watch. Like the way that Maeve Og, Dorothy or Dervla can just turn into absolute behemoths in that area to break clear of the tackle. Like they don't look like that big physical, I suppose, that we see, like we'll say more like a front row type of a player, but when they get going, like they're wrecking balls in there. But the way that Munster can transition from defense into attack is outstanding. I suppose when they were pinned back relatively early, and then Dervla gets over, and we had a couple of instances where like the likes of Dervla over Maeve Og can just take off down the wing as if nothing is deterring them. And obviously those final 10 minutes when Maeve went off with the yellow card, it was definitely more nerve-wracking at the fact that they were missing one of those key links at the back. Their back row were definitely outstanding in the opening win against Ulster. But no, I would agree with you there that those 3 players definitely are standout performers for Munster. And they were definitely key again. The likes of Dorothy's tackling, I spoke with her after the game, and that's just bred into the Munster way of life. That's just how they play. The back rows. If we look at Munster teams throughout the years, they have those physical players that come in, and that's just, I suppose, part of the business, to be honest.
Stand up and fight, as they say.
Mhm.
You did catch up with a few of the participants after the game. Do you want to intro these pieces?
Yeah, so first of all, we were chatting with Mike Storey. Mike is the assistant coach with Niamh at Munster, and we're just having just a general chat with him, of course, after the game, just to suppose his thoughts on how the performance went, any injuries, looking ahead, obviously now to Connacht on Saturday. That's obviously going to be a huge game if they can wrap it up with 3 wins from 3. They have the title won. But of course, Leinster do kick off at 5:30, so we'll have to see what way that works out. And then, obviously, the big question on everyone's minds there was who was in the know on the proposal, and I suppose he does tell us all and a few other things. So yeah, we can take a listen to what Mike had to say, I suppose.
It's hard. I suppose it's hard to put in words. It was, look, we were playing against a very good Leinster team, very motivated. So obviously both teams were well up for it. I think we took a little while to settle. Like, they got the early try and we kind of had to, I suppose, get our way back in the game. I was kind of happy that we got a couple of scores in the first half, and then I felt like the second half, to be honest, I think they probably had the ascendancy for the last quarter, or last kind of 10 or 15 minutes, which put us under pressure, but fair play to the girls for their defence to hold out there. So look, we're happy, we'll take the win. We've obviously got Connacht next week, so we've got to kind of keep working away for the week and see how we get on then. We'll obviously try and play with that bit of physicality, but like training wise, there's a lot of tired bodies after the two intense games in a row. So I'd say we'll kind of wind it back a small bit this week just to allow people to recover, and we'll see how everyone's fixed come Monday training, and we'll go on from there. Not really. I think we were lucky in that respect. There was a few people just got knocks that came off, but I don't think they're too serious. So again, we'll find out over the next couple of days where they're at, and we'll go from there.
And I suppose the biggest part of the news, the engagement at the end. Was that a surprise spur of the moment thing, or were you all in on it?
I knew nothing about it. I know Breezy kind of, I suppose, knew about it, and it was kind of kept quiet between a few people from what I can gather, and they just went through there. But it's delighted for the two girls. They're lovely. I've known both of them for a long time, and they're just so happy for them.
Yeah, pass on our congratulations anyway.
Yeah, thanks.
Things, I suppose, can change in the blink of an eye. Obviously, when the yellow card happens at such a late stage, you were going bringing on 2 subs. Did it change the impact of the game? Were you going, okay, we're going to bring on someone else, changes the dynamic? What was going through? What would have been going through your mind at that stage when a player like Maeve Oakes goes off and you're down to 14 at such a pivotal moment of the game?
Yeah, we actually had a discussion in the back of the stand there about it. We were like, do we go ahead with the subs? And to be honest, in the forwards wise, the idea of bringing Ciaron on was to bring that energy. And Maeve Oakes, in fairness, had played with a lot of energy through the game, so it was like, actually, you know what? We will make that change because we still need that energy there. So we were kind of, it made us, I suppose, review our decision, but it didn't change the decision, if that makes sense.
And obviously 2 wins from 2, title is looking like it is there. Would that be in your minds now going into Connacht, or will you just take it as it comes because anything can happen in the sport?
I know it's a bit of a cliche, but it's kind of week by week. We've had 2 tough games. Obviously, Connacht are going to be very tough. They're going to be trying to knock us over. So if we take our eye off the ball at all, then we're kind of putting a handbrake on ourselves in a way. We need to kind of keep focused on that game. So week by week, really.
Delighted. It was a real physical battle. I kind of haven't come down from the adrenaline yet, to be honest. Also not feeling all the soreness of my body, but we took it in 10-minute blocks. It was kind of a next job thing. There was a knock on, what's our next focus? So it was just a continuous looking forward, having each other's backs, whether it be a mistake or something good that happened. So just so proud of the entire team and how everyone showed up. There was real heart there was work rate, it was tough. There's going to be some broken bodies, but we beat Leinster at home. You can't beat that feeling. Good, yeah. The series isn't over. Connacht are to be respected too. They're a tough team from the west. Like, they're going to put up a fight as well. So we're going to enjoy this for what it is, and then refocus Monday, recover, get back, get what we want sorted for like team shape, etc. for the weekend, and focus on the Connacht match. Oh yeah, you couldn't hear yourself. It's at stages because of the Munster crowd, and like, your parents are up there, and your home club, etc. It just means so much. It's seldom that you get to play at home for a Munster against Leinster, and it means so much to get the win and to have everyone you love there. So yeah, massive day.
You mentioned obviously the soreness of the body. Those hits weren't exactly the softest, especially when you were trying to keep Leinster at bay. Is that, I suppose, part of the coaching plan? Physical, hard-hitting style of rugby.
Yeah, that's rugby. We're not going to be, we're not soft. It's going to be in your face, big tackles. So yeah, that's what it was. It's hard hitting. It's tough. It's phase after phase. I suppose it's everything that Munster rugby embodies.
Has it been tough for you, I suppose, with the quick turnaround from the AIL season, going into a final with Blackrock, now coming into the Interpros, after the Interpros, looking at a potential Ireland call-up and going into that as well? Does it get fairly tough on the body with all the different games, different trainings, and I suppose a little time frame of rest in between?
Yeah, we're trying to emulate the men's game and get to that professional level. So that means games week in, week out. That means recovering. That means having what we need to recover, what we need to train well, strengthening programs. It's all a process of getting to that level. So I think people are adapting well. Some people were sick over Christmas. Some people didn't train for one session to manage their load. It's all about monitoring it all. And there's people in the teams who work hard to make sure that the players are 100% come match day. And that's what's happened today, clearly.
So some interesting thoughts there from Dorothy Wall as well after listening to Mike Storey post-game. Diarmuid's big decisions ahead of the weekend. Connacht, of course, the venue for the last round for Munster. They really only need to pick up a bonus point here to secure the title, but they'll want to do this in style, right?
Yeah, I know. They'll want to do the clean sweep, make the 3 wins from 3. I suppose from asking Mike in the post match, just asking him about injuries and stuff. I suppose, will they want to maybe give a couple of players who were on maybe the fringes of the panel a chance to shine against Connacht? I suppose, look, it'll depend on what way the game is going for them. But as you see, like they have that 5-point swing at the top of the table. They are looking impressive. I'm sure Leinster will leave Queens on Saturday with the points against Ulster. It looks like Ulster haven't had the best of season so far. Leinster are looking dangerous. They caused Munster plenty of threat, and only for that late try from Stephanie Carroll, it could have been a different story. Munster managed to get it out at the end of the day, but they'll be expecting the win. Connacht against Ulster at the game on Saturday as well was the second game of the day. That game was also fairly hotly contested, and Connacht they look strong in that game. They will want to, they'll want to come out and at home soil and get the win over Munster. It's their only home game of the season, so they'll want to leave the sports ground with a win on Saturday. But look, it's going to be definitely a tough, dogged game, and Munster will definitely want to do it. But they'll know that Leinster are waiting there to pick up the scraps, and Leinster will know by the time they kick off in Queens whether they're in with a chance of it or not.
You'd have to go for Munster, I suppose. The ball's kind of in their court, and you expect them to get at least 1 point. You'd probably expect them to win, to be fair. Just on Leinster, I think Dana O'Brien, the number 10, has been exceptional. She's been exceptional this season in the AIL with Old Belvedere, but she's also been exceptional in the Interpros. Aoife Dalton as well, number 13, brilliant player. Like, these are all kind of girls that will be pushing for that Ireland place come the Six Nations. And I think the Interpros has been great. The fact that it's been on TV, we've been able to see the talent coming through because everyone was bitterly disappointed when Ireland didn't qualify for the World Cup last season. But I think now we can see that there's a lot of young talent coming through in all the provinces, and we can really build forward for the future.
Yeah, watching the likes of Dana there at the weekend, like she's a phenomenal player. She's absolutely phenomenal kicker, and I suppose it's there. Watch the game. It's like you've Nicole Cronin at one side, you've Dan O'Brien at one side, you've the youngster against the more experienced head, the person who's probably going to be picked at number 10 in the Six Nations squad. We'll learn that at a later stage this year on who does get the call up. But no, I agree with you there. Like, a lot of these girls would have seen in the AIL as well this year, and it's great that the AIL is producing players that now get to go on to provincials. They get their day as the provincial player and will be able to put their hands up for Ireland selection.
Absolutely. I suppose while we have you, Diarmuid, let's talk a little bit about the schools game in recent weeks. I suppose the three of us will all be featuring and covering our own provinces. I've been lucky enough to be at 3 of the Connacht Schools games. Of course, 3 more scheduled for tomorrow. We'll have to see what the weather is like at the moment. We'll check this evening. All games still going ahead at the moment, all more or less the same time. 12:30 at 1 o'clock. Marist travel to Craigs to take on CBS Roscommon. Muirdex host Garbally College. Both teams, of course, beaten last week. It's a do or die for them if they want to have hope of a semi-final spot. While the Jazz host Summerhill, both teams winning last week, they can confirm a semi-final spot in that group should they come through that. Diarmuid, I know Ciaron, Leinster stuff you'll be covering for us in Energy Park and hopefully the RDS later in the spring as well. Hasn't quite started yet, but Diarmuid, you've been busy. Games last week, another set of quarterfinals next week. Your thoughts on the Munster competition so far?
Yeah, we've I suppose with the way the Munster competition works, there's a lot of detail that goes on with it in terms of the way that the schedule goes. So we only had the first round of games there earlier on in the week on Wednesday and Thursday. Both games definitely action-packed and dramatic in terms of the finish. Both games being decided by a last minute. One game was decided by a last minute score, the other by one of them actually missing. But I suppose the first game we'll be talking with Bandon against Castletroy. And with the way that the seeding worked, Bandon actually had to go into the first round to then be put into the quarterfinal placement and semi-final placement, and the way that it works with that. And for a lot of the game, it looked like they mightn't have got over the line against the Castletroy team, but Castletroy, to their credit, were fighting tooth and nail for it. And Bandon worked their scores. Peter Symington, their fly half, was in phenomenal form throughout the day. He kicked a late penalty, and I was thinking, all right, here we go. And then Robert McConkey stepped up just inside, or it was just outside the Bandon 22, last kick of the game, and it just goes wide. And you can tell that the Castletroy players they're just devastated on the field. And having just scored a try about 3 or 4 minutes earlier that looked like it was the winning score, you just thought it was going to be their day. They were going to get their day in the limelight, but unfortunately for them, they didn't get it. Fast forward to the next day, and Glenstall Abbey get a try in what looked to be the 70th minute. Now our clock wasn't stopped in UL. There was a couple of injuries going on through the game, and they get the late try. Then Bantry go up the other end. They have a chance at a penalty. I have to give a shout out to Dylan Hicks, who's the fly half for Bantry. He's been someone who's been on the radar in the Munster Academy. He's definitely a player that we can anticipate will probably end up getting a Munster call-up, or will be a player in the AIL in the next to near future. He was having a phenomenal day for the T, and in an absolute adverse weather conditions, to say the least. The posts inside in UL were doing some fair moving on the day, but they had the chance to draw it late on, opted to go for the scrum, and then a couple of minutes later, it's just one of those blink and you miss it tries, to be honest. But it was Ciaran O'Sullivan. He just has the ball. They're given the penalty, takes a little kick and go, gets over, and then the entire Bantry team is on the field. Hicks is trying to get the ball to take the conversion. His entire teammates are around him. They're like, "Oh, sod the conversion. The game's over. Like, we've won. We're after securing it." And now we go on to the second round. You can see the fixtures there on your screen. And just for someone who might know the way that the Munster Senior Cup works, so when you see quarterfinal eliminators and semi-final eliminators, so the likes of the big game in 2 weeks' time, which is in Musgrave Park, will be the Cork Derby between Presentation Brothers and Christian Brothers. So whoever wins that game is automatically put into the semi-final. Whoever loses that game will then go on and face one of the winners in the respective quarterfinal eliminators. So even if you lose the semi-final, you still have a chance in the cup. But that's kind of the way that the seeding has worked at the moment. So the winners of the Rockwell game against Bantry will go on, and they will face the losers of Presentation Brothers, Christian Brothers, and then in the other game, it's vice versa. So the likes of St. Munchins and Art School Ree have a great chance getting into the semi-final, whereas last year's winners are in Crescent College. They have to go through and face Bandon in a quarterfinal eliminator with the way the seeding is worked. So it's great for some schools, but other schools will have to obviously have a much tougher route to it. But the action has been fairly action-packed so far. With a couple of games, we'll have 4 games next week. So definitely some more dramatic days yet to come, with some couple of last-minute scores.
You mentioned Hicks there, and I suppose I always when I'm watching schools, I always think who's catching my eye, who's the next up and coming talent. So who else have you looked at and went, they could have an exciting future?
I suppose there's a couple of what we've seen in games. I suppose I've only seen just the two games so far. In the likes of watching Bandon and Castle Troy, it was hard to pick, I suppose, a standout for that game. I'll have to call Symington one of the players that I was saying from the fly half perspective that he could just step up and just kick it over from any distance. It wasn't really phasing him. Caleb Hart, their winger, was explosive as well, as was Conor Ryan. So they're going to be looking progressive. Dylan Hicks for Bantry was impressive for them as well. And unfortunately for the captain of Bantry, on the day his run was kind of ended by a line out movement that saw him ended up on his ankle. So unfortunately for him, Fionn Barry. Hopefully he'll be back in action now for next week. You know, he did go off. He was limping when he left the field, so it's tough on players where they might get one or two games in the cup and to see, you know, a player go off early. But he was looking very impressive in their early moves, and the likes of Killian Brennan at fullback was a good kicker for Glenn Stall and Harry Gleeson as well. But you know, it's going to be. I think that's where these guys they're leaving school now. It's kind of what's going to be next to them. Are they going into college, or will they be focusing on trying to break into a couple of AIL teams? It's going to be interesting what, I suppose, career path are they going to have maybe an extra year in school, depending on age.
Yeah, and I think we talked about some of the stars coming out of the Connacht game as well. Last week's show, 2 games obviously played before we went out on air last Wednesday night. But there was one game, the Holders going for 3 in a row, Sligo Grammar School. They had a good, solid victory over CBS Roscommon on Thursday. But to be honest, they didn't have it all their own way. And in fact, they were 12-0 up at half time against the wind. And I think everybody there would have expected them to push on with the win in the second half. It didn't happen. CBS really put up a really, really impressive performance. Here's the group tables as they stand at the moment. Of course, CBS, they're fighting for their life tomorrow. They play Marist College. 2 teams from that group in Pool 2 there go through to the semi-final. So that's a straight shootout between them. How important will that losing bonus point be from CBS Roscommon? They knew it themselves. They kicked the ball out of touch, but 5 to 10 yards off their own line. In injury time, they could have rescued a draw, but they knew how important that bonus point could be. I don't think Grammar will be as kind of off the boil in a week's time when they face Marist, and whether Marist can beat them or not, they're very, very evenly matched. But in the other group, tomorrow sees Summerhill and Gloucester Ignorage of the Jez. They will face off tomorrow in Galway, while Garberley and Muirdex will play in Ballina tomorrow. Of course, CBS Roscommon at home in Craigs, the fabulous facility down there. But for me, there was some really, really impressive players for the grammar school as well. I think Diarmuid O'Connell scored 2 tries, but to be fair, there were team tries that he happened to be at the end of, but he finished them really, really well. Their up-and-coming out-half, Mark Tempany, has really set the I suppose, tongues wagging here in Connacht as well in terms of his performance. Still only a very, very young first year playing at this level with the school. Jared Murtha coming through, up and coming, really good talent there as well. So plenty of really, really impressive performances. But for me, most of the impressive performances actually came on the other side for Marist College, or not Marist, for CBS. And a lot of lads, 2 centres, name escapes me right now, but I think it's Jack Donnelly and Jack. I can't remember the 2 Jacks anyway at centre were very, very impressive. Jack Fleming, Aaron McAteer didn't really get that much involved in the game. He was playing on the wing, but he caught one ball that he had no right to catch. The conditions were terrible. The wind was terrible. The long passes were a little bit unpredictable because of that. And one ball got caught by the wind. He had gone past it, and you can't see me now as a movement, but he reached down to his ankles behind him with one hand and just pulled it back into possession. He had absolutely no right to retain possession, but it was just a little bit special. And I think that for me was probably the moment of the game. We talked about it enough on the commentary of the game, but yeah, I think the schools game is going to be exciting. Can't wait for Ulster and Leinster to join the party in the next couple of weeks. Of course, here on Final Whistle, I know the 3 of us are going to be heavily involved in all of that and talking about all of that. And Ciaran, yourself, any expectations going into the Leinster Senior Cup? I know Blackrock are thereabouts, but as we're seeing, Garberley have won every second 48 in out of 100 or so senior cups west of the Shannon. Blackrock have done even a bigger percentage in Leinster. Can anyone beat them?
I think, they are favourites. I think they dominated last year, to be honest, from first round to the final. And, now if you look at the Ireland under-20s team that was announced today, Gus McCarthy is the captain. He was the captain of Blackrock College last year, obviously, when they won the cup. And then you've got Paddy McCarthy, who was in the front row for them also. So you can see that talent's coming through. And that it's the same with Michaels and Blackrock every year. They always have talent coming through. But Newbridge will be very good this year, I think. That Junior Cup winning team of 2 years ago, a lot of them will be involved in the senior team this season. I think they'll start to come good this year. And maybe if they don't hit it this year, they could very well hit it next season. So it's very much a two-year project there. And Pres Bray have a really, really good team. The only thing is they got Blackrock in the first round. So it's probably the best group of 6 years they've had in a long time, and they were so unlucky with the draw, but that's just the way it is. They were really good they had a really good team last year, but they just didn't perform. So maybe the big game against Blackrock, they might turn up. Who knows? We could have a shock in our hands. But yeah, Belvedere College will be very good as well. Michael's Rock, as I said, and then you always get one team that surprises you a little bit. But yeah, Rock and Michaels are probably the two teams, and Gonzaga as well would have to be in the conversation there too.
Yeah, interesting times ahead in schools rugby, but that's probably all we have time for. There's the Leinster Senior Cup fixtures, as we have them. Of course, 1 or 2 spots still to be filled. The Vinnie Murray Cup has to provide 2 teams for that last 16 round with Leinster, but plenty of schools rugby to be played over the coming weeks before we get to provincial senior schools cup finals mid-March or so, traditionally when those games will be played. And I think depending on the weather, we could see some postponements tomorrow here in Connacht. The weather's not great down this part of the world, but we'll see. We'll know more tomorrow. We will have live coverage of some of those games depending on the weather and cancellations as we go. Diarmuid, thanks for joining us and bringing us up to speed on everything women's interpros. Where are you for this weekend?
We'll look it up at the sports ground for that final title decider between Connacht and Munster. So we'll have live coverage of that game. We'll have live coverage, obviously, of the Ulster Leinster decider then at 5:30 as well that evening. But it'll be interesting to see where what's happening. I suppose they will have a helicopter ready in Galway in case Connacht pull it out of the bag. So we'll have to see. Come about 4:00 on Saturday evening. What's the crack with the title?
I just get a really, really fast car that's going to drive the whole way down the motorway. Diarmuid, thanks for joining us. Pleasure as always.
No worries at all, lads.
Diarmuid Kearney there talking to us about women's football and also the schools game that he's been covering down in Munster. Ciaran, we really only have about 10 minutes left to get through all 5 divisions of the AIL. We've one done, but let's just maybe fly through quickly. Any particular games or talking points you want to talk about from whichever division? I'll let you kind of guide me as to where we're going to go from here.
In 2C, I suppose the big result was Ballina. They got a really good victory. I think it was 1918. Yeah. Which Tullamore would have been strong favourites going into that. Obviously, second in the league. So massive result for Ballina considering they've been really struggling this season. In Stonians, another ridiculous result against Doma. Like they just look unstoppable, to be honest. And at this point, I'd say they're gonna go up, but I say that anyway. But
look at the points difference. 252 points difference in the positive. That's just unbelievable. That's winning the games by an average of 25.2 points per match.
That's
just domination. Yeah,
no, it's actually scary. But from their point of view, they're obviously loving their rugby there, and we spoke to them last week. But yeah, it's just Stonians doing their thing at the top, and then there's a bit of a race between kind of from 2nd to 6th. Maybe there's a lot of teams still in that conversation for top 4, and at this point you'd be thinking it is when you're aiming where you're going to finish, you're aiming for 2nd because first is kind of at this point maybe sewn up unless Stonians have some sort of weird explosion, but I don't see it coming.
Can't see it happening myself either. Where next are we going to head off to? Oops, wrong one.
We may as go to 2B, I suppose.
Okay, let's work our way up the table.
And the big result there is 44-0, Enniscorthy's first win of the season massive for them, absolutely massive. Not just the fact that they got the win, but the result itself, 44-0. I think Galwegians beat them in the reverse fixture prior to Christmas, so nobody really saw that coming. I think Belfast Harlequins had a surprising defeat as well to Malahide. I was surprised by that result. Greystones and Corinthians, the top two, looking very, very good this season. Greystones still unbeaten, but there's only 3 points between them and Corinthians at the top. I think, it's another really interesting division. Like, will Sligo get brought into the relegation fight later on in the season? Maybe. Wanderers haven't performed as well as I thought they were going to. So, a lot can still happen in that 2B table.
Yeah, Sligo, of course, they're actually closer to the promotion spots there. I'll get shot if I don't say that. They're 4 points off the promotion playoffs, 7 points away from relegation. So
I only said it to wind you up. I know you
did, but still all to play for in that particular division. Plenty of teams, and the Galwegians, I suppose, will be smart after that defeat at the weekend. They had a chance really to put a nail in Enniscorthy's coffin. Wasn't to be for them. Enniscorthy, great result for them, and it really does give them a lifeline of survival. It's still an outside chance, I think, with the way the competition is structured and where they'll pick up other points. I'm not quite sure, but it really has a positive start for them.
A 44-0 win could transform your season, and it could light the fire up you, and you could really go on a run. So who knows, that result could do lots of things for Enniscorthy.
Division 2A next, as we go up the grades. Any thoughts on any of these games here?
Yeah.
For me, the Cashel win against Blackrock.
Yeah, the Cashel win against Blackrock was huge. Look at the two of them in the table, only 2 points separating them. Queen's at the top with Blackrock and Cashel, massive win for Cashel. Barn Hall, very much in that top four conversation now too. I just think that Cashel result was probably the big one in 2A this weekend. Queens are just doing their thing at the top, very much like last season. And that 2A it's another competitive division, but they're all competitive. So,
in terms of this division, there's a lot of high-scoring games where even the losing side had almost 30 points and picked up try bonus points as well. I know Queen's University was a big result. Can't remember off the top of my head which other game was massive, but I think the Barnhall game 42-29 with UL Bows, you probably would have expected them to win a bit more comfortably than that. And Queens had something similar in terms of the scoreline. I think it was 43-25 to Ballymena. Again, given the positions in the table for both teams, you would have probably expected maybe the big score for the winning side, but not necessarily for the losing side.
Yeah, but that could just be down to towards the end of the game, the other team get a bit careless in defence and gaps start to appear. It could be a scenario that type of, I don't know, because I don't get to see a lot of these games, but that can be the case sometimes. If you've built up a big lead, maybe they take the foot off the gas and they let the teams back in a little bit. But yeah, nobody's complaining when there's loads of tries, though. That's all I know.
Well, maybe the defensive coaches. Yeah. In terms of Division 1A, we might as well finish with the top grade in the AIL. Some big wins here as well. I suppose Garryowen looked to be dead and buried at this point, 14 points with only 8 games to go. It's a big ask given how their season has gone. But some impressive results again. Ballinhinch, good solid performance in Belfield. Things are looking pretty good.
Yeah, no, they're doing really well, to be fair, to be where they are. I couldn't have predicted that at the start of the season. Even when they did beat Lansdowne in that first game, I didn't really know what because last season, remember, they were really struggling, and relegation could have been a problem if it was a 2-team relegation like a normal season, but it was only one team, and it was UCC who went down on that occasion. But yeah, Ballinhinch doing really well. I suppose the big thing is Lansdowne getting the 34-24 victory, and they have a new coach now as well, Declan Fassbender, which is it'll be interesting to see what he can do in the second half of the season. Can he get them further up that table? Young Munster are still very much in the fight for the top 4. I think Trinity, the thing about Trinity is they, like we were saying about try scoring, Trinity score so many tries and they get the try bonus point and they also get losing bonus points. But they actually haven't won a game since round 6, but they're still in that top 4. It's actually crazy. It's just the way they can score tries for fun, but this weekend they play Terranure, and that is a huge game, I think, like really big game. And then also in that top 4, Clontarf host Cork Con, another huge game. And then in the same respect, further down the table, Lansdowne versus UCD is a big game in terms of that relegation battle. So there's big games happening kind of all around.
For me, the Shannon Young Munster game, I think, is going to be an important one. That local derby, a bit of Limerick pride coming in, and it could be the one that possibly gives Shannon that little bit of breathing space, maybe in that relegation discussion. You talked about Trinity not quite closing games out. They almost picked up a draw, coming back so late to level matters, only to be ripped away from them by Cork Con at the weekend.
Yeah, but they've done that every game they've played since round 5 against Clontarf. So they lost at the very end against Clontarf. In round 6, they had a bit of a lead against Shannon, so it didn't really matter. But Shannon scored 2 tries at the end of the game, I think, to kind of make the gap smaller. And then they lost in the last play against Young Munster. They lost basically at the end against Terranure as well. They let Cork Con score to draw in round 9. And then in round 10, Cork Con scored at the end to win. So I don't know what it is. They are good enough to beat these teams, but it's almost like they've got this thing in their head now, like a mental thing that come towards the end of the game. I don't know if they get a bit nervous or a bit shaky, or it's affected them a little bit. But the only thing, as I said, that's working in their favour, they are still accumulating points, be it losing bonus points, try bonus points. Like, they're getting 2 points even if they lose, which is massive. And that's what's keeping them in the top 4 at the moment. But there's some huge games coming up for them. I think they've got Young Munster away after the Terranure game, and then they've got Shannon away, so they've got some really big games coming up. And personally, I'd love for them to make the top 4, because besides Terranure, they play the most exciting rugby. Like, the way they throw it around, the likes of Ronan Quinn, James Dillon, Gavin Jones, Aaron Egan, who I think is one of the best 10s in the AIL. Like, the way they play is just great. But I think where they lack at the minute is up front. Physically, sometimes teams edge them and kind of beat them up a little bit. And even with some lads gone off to the Ireland under-20s, Paddy McCarthy in particular, he won't be available for a good while now, and he'll be a big loss to them. So player availability is also a massive thing.
Yeah, absolutely. But a lot to be decided this weekend, as of course we get ever closer to that final round of fixtures that'll decide who actually finishes where over the end of the season. Ciaran, it's been a tight show. Thank you so much to Chris Parker. It feels like yesterday nearly since he was with us at the top of the show. We've got through so much since. Chris, of course, from City of Armagh, the head coach there. Best of luck to him at the weekend. I think it's Nace they travel to at the weekend to try and get another 4 points or 5 points even on their hunt for that 1B title later in the spring and early summer. Also to Diarmuid Kearney, who joined us ahead of or after a weekend of Interpro and late women's action and the school stuff down in Munster. We'll be catching up with him again after the quarterfinals / semi-finals, eliminators, progressors. We're not quite sure. It's all a bit strange.
That was confusing for me.
It's confusing at the best times. But basically, if you win the semi-final one, you're into the semi-final. If you lose it, you're into a quarter.
So it's like a mock semi-final.
Kind of. It's kind of a backdoor type thing. Listen, they get it. It works. It's going to throw up a lot of exciting rugby in the coming weeks. We'll have it all here on finalwhistle.ie, here on the Wednesday night show, but also on the website through the week. Ciaran, it's been a pleasure as always. Thanks for joining me again.
Yeah, I really enjoyed it. See you next week.
Talk to you next week.